Hey everybody, Aaron Bishop here with the Patterns of Life Bible. Today we are going to look at one of the more iconic events that occurs in the Bible. It's one that provides the setup for the entire book of Exodus. You see, the book of Exodus is a revelation of who God is from one end to the other. His name, his qualities, his characteristics, every aspect of God is explored throughout the book. Well, it just so happens at the very beginning of the book that God introduces himself, and in this introduction he provides a proper name. But this proper name is connected to several very interesting ideas. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at Deuteronomy, pericope 8, and let's see what we can find out about God from this chapter. The text in question in a normal Bible is Exodus chapters 3, verse 1 through 4, verse 17. Yes, I know that is multiple chapters, but sometimes the patterns that occur in the Bible don't occur according to the modern numbering system that we've applied to our Bible. Sometimes it takes multiple chapters, sometimes it's shorter than a chapter, sometimes it's exactly a chapter. In this case, we have 1.5 chapters that are included as part of this pattern. And this is the story of Moses at the burning bush. We're all fairly familiar with the story, right? Moses is tending sheep on the edge of a mountain, and he looks up and he sees a bush that burns but is not consumed. Well, at the very beginning in pericope A, we see that it is an angel of the Lord appears to him in the flame of the fire of the bush. Now, this is the key component of pericope A, is this word angel, because in the Hebrew, the word for angel is the Hebrew word malach. Now, what's super interesting is that the word malach can mean either angel or it can mean messenger. In pericope A prime, we read that Moses is being sent to Pharaoh as a messenger of this message. We don't actually read the word messenger here, but we read of the role of messenger being given to Moses and to Aaron to take the message of freedom to Pharaoh in order to begin the process of Exodus. In B and B prime, again, we don't see an exact correlation here. The words aren't exactly repeated, but there is a repeated idea. In B, it is a fire that had been kindled within the bush, or a fire that burned within the bush is how it's translated in this particular translation. But in B prime, it is God's anger that is kindled against Moses. Now, throughout the Bible, this idea of anger and fire, they're used almost synonymously. Fire becomes a picture or a symbol or metaphor for the idea of anger. And we see this here in this pericope, that these two ideas are juxtaposed against each other. The fire that is kindled in the bush but does not burn it, and the anger that is kindled against Moses but does not harm him. In C and C prime, then we read the Lord speaking. He's speaking a message to Moses. In C, it's just simply, come near, I am here. Take off your shoes because you're on holy ground. In C prime, then, God is angry at Moses, and he responds with, who made man's mouth, or who makes the dumb, or the deaf, or the seeing, or the blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, and I will be with your mouth, and I'll teach you what to say. And so in C, the call is come near to me. And in C prime, the call is go forth and do what I have asked you to do. In D and D prime, then we find the connection that God has to Moses. Because up until now, Moses may not really know who it is that he's speaking to. We don't know how familiar Israel was with Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, with Adonai in Egypt. We do know that the cries of the people rose to Adonai when they cried out. In D, we find this connection that God has to the people of Israel and to Moses himself. And this correlation, this foundation for relationship that's being presented here is the relationship that God had with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that we read of back in the book of Genesis, and the promises that God made to them back then. Specifically, examine Genesis 15 and the covenant that was cut there where God says he will lead his people up out of the land that has taken them slaves. And in D prime, this is the same idea because Moses is now presenting to God, how are the people going to believe me? How are they going to know that it's you that sent me? And so God gives Moses several signs to perform in order to demonstrate who he is. But those signs, they're all founded on the idea of Adonai, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, being the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. In E then comes the promise that God is going to deliver Israel out of Egypt. Now this, again, Genesis 15, this is the promise that was made to Abraham back in Genesis 15. This is the promise that was reiterated to Isaac and Jacob throughout the book of Genesis. And now this promise that God made back in Genesis is being presented to Moses as the reason for why he is appearing to him now and the call that he is placing on Moses' life. In E prime, we see this call and we see this promise expanded just a bit further. We see the idea that the king of Egypt is not going to let you go, even though the promise is that he will let you go. And so he's going to have to force Pharaoh to let him go. And as he forces Pharaoh to let him go, Israel is going to despoil Egypt on their way out. Again, this promise from back in Genesis 15 is being expounded upon for Moses so that he can go forward and do what he's being asked to do, with this understanding and foundation that this is something that God had promised to do many, many centuries before. In F and F prime, we see this idea that God cares and that he does see the affliction of his people. The people in Egypt, they would have wondered if God saw them in their hardship and the bondage and the death and the unending workload that was on their shoulders. In F, we see God says, "The cry of the people of Israel has come to me, and I have seen the oppression wherewith Egypt has oppressed Israel." And in F prime, again, it's repeated. "The Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has seen you, has visited you, and has seen what has been done to you in Egypt." In G then comes the call. "I have sent you." Moses is being called out. He's being elevated to the position of that messenger to go and to proclaim the message of freedom to the people of Israel in Egypt. In G prime, it's a repeat, and Moses is given a script of sorts to say to Israel at this time. "You shall say to the children of Israel that the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, a memorial to all generations." And here in H, in the center, is kind of what we would expect, but it may be not what you would expect. Because here in the center, we get a description of who God is, of his attributes. "I am that I am." In Hebrew, it's more, "I will be what I will be." But it's not his proper name. His proper name isn't given until G prime, until we're out of the center. The center is a revelation of God's nature as "I am" or "I will be," and not as a name that we can call on him, a label that is placed on him, or a moniker that is the words that come out of our mouth in reference to him. That's not until G prime, as you're backing out of the chiasm once again. And this is so incredibly important and foundational because God's name, yes, it's important, but his name isn't limited to the thing that we call him. His name is his character. It is his nature. It is his fame and his story. It's his reputation. It's the things that are developed all throughout the book of Exodus. It's not just Yod He Vav He and whatever sort of vocalization you give to those letters. His name is his nature and his character and his qualities. That is what's important when it comes to God. And that is the center of what is revealed to Moses here on Mount Sinai in the burning bush.